Hello, I am Paula Bennett and welcome to my New Zealand Herald podcast, Ask Me Anything. Now, one thing I've learnt in life is it's never too late to learn something new. So on this podcast, I talk to people from all walks of life to hear about how they got to where they are and get some advice and guidance on some of life's biggest questions. Today, we focus on business and being an entrepreneur, something Cecilia Robinson has a wealth of knowledge in. Cecilia is the co-founder of Au Pair Link, My Food Bag and Tend Health. She has won so many awards for her work that I can't list them. Cecilia has now also put her weight behind the Before 16 campaign in an effort to protect our young people from the harm of social media. Oh my goodness, she is such a busy woman. I am so grateful to you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
Yeah, it's lovely to be here with you.
Good. We do know each other, so that's always quite nice too.
Yeah.
So, we can have a bit of I'll ask awkward questions.
Go wild, I love it. And I'll ask them in the return.
Actually, I once saw you getting an award and you were nearly late because you'd had to whip to the ladies and you just told the whole crowd and went, yeah, I'm an oversharer.
Yeah, it was 1,000 people in the room and I think I said I needed to pee, which was awesome in hindsight. I was incredibly sleep deprived in my defence, had no idea I was going to win anything and almost didn't show up. So it was a rough night.
Yeah, but I loved it. I loved you. I don't think I'd actually met you. I don't think I'd met you in person before then. And I just sat there and went, oh, I want to know that woman.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, well, that's in one of the things that was etched in my memory was that night now in hindsight. So yeah.
There you go.
Brilliant, yeah.
No, well, I like it.
Yeah.
Because I did sit there and think, oh, yeah, I'm an oversharer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's relatable content.
Yeah, I get that completely. Okay, quick fire questions just to warm us up. Tell us something that most people don't know about you.
Oh, something that most people don't know about. Probably that I'm far more introverted than what people think that I am. Like, I think I'm an ambivert. So in person, I can be quite extroverted and I like, to chat to people. But the reality of it is that I can also be quite introverted and just like time by myself with my family.
Yeah. It's precious, isn't it?
Yeah, it is really precious. And so I think people just assume because I'm quite loud and chatty that I'm, constantly extroverted, but that's probably not my natural disposition.
We can talk a bit more about that later, I think, because anyway, no, we'll get there. Okay, if you could time travel, would you rather go to the past or the future?
Oh, that's a really hard question. No one's asked me that before. I love that. I would probably love to go into the future. I mean, look, I would like to go back in time because there's some amazing historical moments in history that I would love to be able to see firsthand. But I think probably it's more important to look to the future at this point. And so I'd love to be able to see, what the future looks like and how we can support or prevent, things going the right or the wrong way.
Because, man, it's changing quickly.
Oh, it really is. Look, and I think that, setting everything aside, we're living in one of the best times of humanity. And so how do you continue to make that thrive, right? How do you continue to improve things around the world?
Yeah, and we're going to talk a bit about health later.
Yeah.
Because it is of interest, but even thinking about, services and medicines and, people keep saying we've got a horizon scan. And I think, my goodness, we didn't know what we didn't know 3-5 years ago. How do we know what's going to come up in the next 3 to 5?
Absolutely. It's almost impossible to be able to predict, right? And that's what's actually so exciting.
I agree. Yeah. I agree. Okay, let's get to know you a bit better before chatting business and in the second half and getting some advice from you. So you grew up in Sweden?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, and so what was life like growing up in Sweden?
Yeah, look, it has. I think it's really given me a broad worldview. Like, I come from like a middle income family from like a small town outside of Stockholm or very close to Stockholm. I went to public school. I think it's interesting, because in New Zealand people talk a lot about schooling and where you go to, but in Stockholm where I grew up, it really wasn't really a choice. You just kind of went to the local school and that was it. And I think it was really foundational. I also knew from quite an early age that I probably didn't belong, and I didn't feel a strong sense of belonging in Sweden or to Sweden. And, early on did a lot of travel to the UK, lived in the US. And then when I came to New Zealand, I found my home. So yeah, I feel really privileged to be a Kiwi.
And how old were you when you came to New Zealand?
Yeah, I came to New Zealand 20 years ago and it's been 20 years. So I've actually probably spent more of my adult life now in New Zealand than what I ever have in Sweden. So it's a turning point.
Because your mother was Swedish?
Yeah, my mother's Swedish and my dad's from the UK. So, I was brought up in a family that was bilingual and my family spoke English at home. And so English has probably always been my emotional language. And so, Swedish was more at school. But, the reality of it is that English was my emotional language from a young age.
When I was in Stockholm, I was quite surprised how bilingual everyone was.
Yeah, everyone's amazing. Like my husband and children will go to Sweden and they'll try to speak Swedish, but everyone's so accommodating and they love speaking English. So they just, as soon as they hear them speaking, they'll swap over to English straight away.
Yeah, really. So you talked on it briefly, but what sort of values do you think that your family instilled in you?
Yeah, both my parents are teachers, but quite different teachers. So my dad came to Sweden when he was like 25, had fallen in love with a Swede and learnt Swedish, and he speaks better Swedish and grammatically writes better Swedish than almost any Swede that you'll know. And he taught kind of complex Swedish and English at Scania for manufacturing. So he was a teacher, but kind of at that high level, translating, difficult technical and engineering work between English and Swedish. And my mum was a teacher at kind of like a middle intermediate school, and she did home economics. She did, kind of was an assistant principal for a while. She did, she was like a school counsellor. She did a bunch of different things. So like I grew up often going with my mum to her school when I was sick. She'd bring me to work with her, kind of the early generation of mum. And I think that was a really, strong foundation. Both my parents worked really hard. I always saw them bring work home. My dad would leave for work really early in the morning and get home late at night. And, it just instilled a discipline in me that if, you want to achieve the things that you are aspiring for, you've got to work hard.
Yeah. Yeah, and that value of education?
Yeah, education's always come through strongly, and I think I look back at it now because I don't have a university degree, I've dropped out of school to pursue our business interests, and that's probably one of the regrets that I have. I would like to go back maybe and get a degree someday, in particular, from Auckland University where I've actually started a degree but I haven't finished it, so yeah.
Well, you're young enough.
I'm going to take that every day of the week.
Grab it.
I'm taking it.
Grab it, Cecilia. Okay, so do you, if you're filling out a form and it says nationality, what do you tick?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, recently I've been filling out Swedish a wee bit because I've been applying for a Swedish passport and trying to get one for my kids. But no, I think I'm a Kiwi first and foremost. And, if I ever had to relinquish citizenship, it's a pretty clear choice for me. This is my country, bury my bones.
So you came 20 years ago, and is it true that you met James, your husband, on the first night you were here?
Yeah, it is true. I mean, we'd actually got to know each other beforehand because he's a friend of my brother's, and I've been, I'd asked my brother to get me in contact with one of his mates before I came out to keep tabs on him while he was living here. And so James and I had actually been talking for MSN back in the day for about 6 months before I arrived. So, yeah, we met the first night that...
and did your eyes just lock? And was it,
Well, I was pretty jet lagged and I feel like I was stinky coming off 48 hours of travel or whatever it was. So, yeah, no, we definitely had a mutual attraction and I think a lot of mutual interests and a lot of alignment. And, it took a couple of months, but... then we were suddenly dating and in a relationship, but it all kind of...
So you'd come to New Zealand for work?
Well, actually I came here because I was meant to study and go to school in Stockholm, and then my brother moved down here, so I decided I just came out of a gap year in the US and then decided that I'd do another gap term, which was a little bit naughty at the time because I was meant to go to law school in Sweden. And so, yeah, I took another kind of gap term and, for my parents, I was meant to go to law school in Stockholm, and instead I kind of ended up waiting tables and doing, administration and odd jobs when I came to New Zealand. And that was amazing.
I was going to say, there's nothing wrong with that.
Oh, it was amazing.
Man, it grounds you, doesn't it?
Oh, and look, I think you learn a lot of lessons around being assertive and customer service and prioritization, and it's a really good thing to do. And I did it for years, right? It was something that was from my early teens all the way through into my, early 20s. And it was really helpful to be able to understand how the world works. And
a bit humbling. I mean, nothing's
totally.
I don't mean to say nothing's beneath you, but I was cleaning the kitchen at work the other day.
Oh no, I mean, I
someone
always
walked in and went, "What are you doing?" And I went, "Oh no," and the joke is if we have sausage rolls and I vacuum.
Oh yeah, no, I love it. But it's the same for us. I laugh because when I come out of board meetings, I had someone tap me on the shoulder the other day, and I'm bringing out all the stuff from the board meeting, and they're like, "You don't need to do that," and I was like, And I do actually need to do that because it's leading, like you just tidy up after yourself. And so, it's just basic.
Yeah.
Just
Now,
basic.
so you and James are in business together.
Absolutely.
So how do you do the boundary of home and work, and does work follow you home?
Yeah, constantly. So I think that I guess that's probably the honest version of it, is that there is no off button. And so we live our life with work completely entwined to who we are and what we do and what we talk about. And that can be, he was having, in bed last night talking about the board meeting that we had this morning, and it's, 11 o'clock at night, and he's, kind of commenting on some things that we needed to discuss. And that's the way I fall asleep, having a conversation with him about board next morning. And look, I think that's our lifestyle and we're really used to it, but I also acknowledge that it doesn't really work for everyone.
And you've got 3 children, right?
We do, yeah. We have a lot of children.
And they're in different stages.
Yeah, I think also that's why it feels like a lot of children. Like I always laugh because, 2 is kind of, but 3 is a whole different board game. One's like a pet, 2 is a zoo, and 3 is Jurassic Park is kind of the way that I define it. And so we've got a 4-year-old, and then I've got a 13-year-old, and then in the middle I've got a 9-year-old. But I did go through this phase where we had a toddler, and then our son's kind of hitting puberty early, and so I had like a teenager and a toddler at the same time. And I was like, wow, I did not think this through. But, I think everybody's a bit smoother and it's settled in.
I was going to say hormones were all over the place.
Yeah, totally. Lots of hormones. So yeah, it's been really interesting to navigate.
Yeah. And family's important to you.
It's at the heart of what we do.
Everyone, but you do block that time out.
Yeah, totally. Like I am quite strict. Our team is really aware of it. I arrive at work around 9 and I do the school run in the afternoon and kind of grab my kids out of school. And then I work from home in the afternoon and evenings, and I say no to almost everything.
I was going to say, you say no to me.
Yeah, I say no to almost everything.
For my women's networking drinks. You're
I actually need, I think this is the year that I'm coming out of what's felt like, perpetually being kind of buried in work and in kids. Yeah. And so I think 4 is actually quite a magical age for us because it's just been so demanding, and all of the kids have got sports and after school activities and emotional stuff that goes on and happenings at school that you kind of need to resolve. And so really focus on, kind of bringing up kids that are happy and healthy and have got healthy minds, and, it's really important to us.
You've talked about having fertility challenges in the past. Can you talk us through a bit about what that was like for you? And there'll be people that are listening that are going through it, or their own daughters are. Yeah. And what we can do to help someone that's going through it.
I think it's important to understand. I mean, like, everyone has their own pathway to having children, and people would look at me and my family now and go, gosh, you're so lucky. Like, look at all you have. And we really are. But it's not a linear journey. And, for us, we were quite young. I was only 23 when I got married. I had Thomas at 27, which is still early, but what a lot of people don't understand is that we tried for about 3 years before we had Tom and had multiple early miscarriages and struggled to get pregnant and went down the fertility route, which I'm really grateful for with Thomas. And then once we had Thomas, we thought it was pretty linear from there. We didn't think we'd have issues, and I felt naturally pregnant after that with our the first baby that we ended up losing that was stillborn. And then we had another late pregnancy loss at 17 weeks, which was really difficult. And it's kind of, that's what's paved the way for us to go into healthcare ultimately. And we were fortunate enough to have Layla subsequently to that, and then to have Charlie, which is kind of our little cherry on top. So yeah, it's been a really challenging.
And how could someone support someone like you? So if I was your friend or if I was your mother, it can be awkward to know whether to talk about it and how to talk about it and what you need.
I think that it was really hard. I mean, I think when you're at different stages, an early miscarriage is completely different from having a stillborn baby to losing a baby. It's all different, right? And there's some horrific things that happen much later in terms of, that journey than what we've had. I think for us, allowing people to grieve and talk about that grieving process, I think that there's a lot of things that's actually happening just purely physically with your body as you're going through those stages, And so I remember feeling quite, unsettled by the fact that, it was a few days where, that the pregnancy and the baby it hasn't been successful, but there's quite a lag from when that's dealt with. And so just supporting people and just being aware that it's not just you that have lost the baby, it's often the husband and the children as well. And so, and just not expecting people to recover straight away. Just constantly having conversations. I think it's a journey that you're on, and I'm grateful for my journey ultimately. I don't know, I'm not particularly spiritual, but, I've got a pretty feisty daughter, and in a way I believe that the two girls that we lost have all been just, consolidated into one firecracker. And so that's kind of the way that I contextualise it and I think about it.
Yeah, I like it. Okay, talking about being a mum, I want to talk about before 16. So can you explain to people listening what before 16 is? We're talking about social media.
Yeah, so basically for before 16, it's something I've been talking about for a few years now, probably 2 or 3 years. And what we're working towards is introducing a minimum age to access social media. And, I think it's really important that parents and the broader public kind of step back and understand what's going on here. Because what's actually happened is that, we legislated for things that we see that are harmful to our population. And I think about things like tobacco, I think about things like alcohol, I think about things like having a minimum driving age. And what we're finding is that we've seen an unprecedented development with our young minds and mental health and eating disorders and bullying and addiction and algorithms. And this is one of the biggest things that's concerning me from a public health point of view. And we need to put better safeguards in place to be able to protect our.
So do you think it's people? those under 16s are accessing information and information's coming at them that they haven't got the maturity to deal with and shouldn't have?
Look, I don't think necessarily 16-year-olds have got the maturity to deal with it either. And I don't think all adults have the maturity to deal with it. When Charlie Kirk was shot and that was passed around on social media like it was just another video, people, it's horrendous, the content that's immediately available to people. And that's just one example. There's lots of examples like that online. And, we used to have, I grew up and there was a local Blockbuster down the road. It wasn't called that, but it was a video store. Sure. And you used to have kind of the content is rated because as children develop, you're not emotionally equipped to deal with some of those things that you're exposed to, a lot of the things that you're exposed to. And the way that the platforms are designed is to create engagement. And it's for people to be stuck on them because that's how they create followers and that's how the platforms monetize their content. And so, I think that I don't think that this is it's almost at a point where it's not really a discussion anymore. This is going to happen. And I've got really high conviction that it will happen in New Zealand. We're seeing a global move towards this. And, I'm really excited about what that's going to look like over the next, period ahead.
Is it realistic? Can we actually physically ban under 16-year-olds from being on social media?
It's absolutely realistic, right? And I think it's much broader than that. I think when you think about things like alcohol and driving and smoking, of course, vaping or whatever it is, right? It's actually about socially norming as a starting point. And I think it's about socially norming to say, like, actually these platforms, we know they're not good for developing minds. And we're going to put expectations in place that that this is not good for you. And it gives parents another thing in their, in the things that we use when we talk to our children about what's healthy and what's harmful for them, to actually say, no, actually, this is not something that's healthy for you at this stage of your development. And so I think it's eminently reasonable and really practical. And we're seeing solutions around the world now that are coming into place. And to be completely frank, I actually think it's borderline naive to think that it's not. Every single platform out there, Meta, Snapchat, Instagram, knows people's date of birth. They know when you're born. They know what type of content that they're targeting at you. This isn't that complicated. We're just making it complicated. And often it's the voices that are opposing, this type of progress that is airing those issues. And the reality of it is that it's eminently reasonable. And any kind of technologist will tell you that.
Yeah. Some of the counter-argument from people like Jaz Thornton would say that for some with their mental health, it is actually coming across the more optimistic and the support that they're looking for. They can't find it at home. They can't find it at school. And actually sometimes they can find it online.
Well, it's pretty clear that's actually not what the evidence says so. The evidence actually says that those that are most at risk end up being more at risk. And I think when we're talking about those who oppose this, it's really important to understand their context within this. Often what we're seeing is that people who are advocating against this type of change are those who are benefiting themselves off the platforms and their content. And so if you've got a large following of young people under 16 this is not the type of legislation that you'll be supportive of, right? And so, yes, there are areas on the internet where people might be getting reaffirming context or support, but actually what the research is saying and what we know about child development is that they need to be finding those relationships broadly in the day-to-day world that they live in with the people that surround them and protect them and want to help them, right? And so, look, I think we just need to be really clear about who's driving the conversation, and how are they benefiting from the outcome that they're advocating for. And what Before 16 is advocating for is for our children, for their mental health, for their well-being, right? And that's really clear. That's our vested interest. And I think those who are advocating against that need to, really think about where their vested interest comes from.
Okay, that's fair enough. We like opinions.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Well, mine are not opinion. They're grounded in fact and research and science. And so that's where they come from.
Okay. All right. Good luck with that. I think we have to see change, and it's getting more unruly out there by the bloody minute. And more frightening. And
look, I think we're all really aware of that. We're seeing this ourselves. And I think, not many adults would look themselves in the mirror and say, I'm not addicted to my phone. And they'd actually probably quite candidly say, I am addicted, and how do I deal with that addiction? And I think that's not just a challenge for young people, it's actually a challenge for all of us about changing how we use technology.
I think that's really fair. All right, Cecilia, I'm going to chat to you about business.
Sure.
How to get some advice and how we sort of move from there. We will now take a quick break and we'll be back soon. Welcome back. Now, let's chat business and get some advice from all you have learned. Because there's a lot, right? I mean, where do you start? Firstly, do you think entrepreneurs are born or are they made?
I don't know. I do think that entrepreneurs are probably born and wired a little bit differently. But there's also things that can be taught. But I definitely think that, there's something there that makes it a little bit different.
What is the reality of founding and running a company?
It is incredibly challenging day to day, and I think that everything, the lessons that we learned from what we learned back in the early days of OPLink to, some of the major lessons on my food bag to the significant societal issues that we're tackling inside Tend, it's really stepping stones, like to actually be able to, get the level of knowledge that you need to run, big businesses. So yeah.
And where do you go from that seed of an idea to then actually thinking, no, this is not just a glass of wine on a Sunday afternoon, good chat.
Yeah.
This has got real bones to it.
Yeah, I think that's where my husband would say, so my magic comes from the doing stuff, and my husband's kind of comes from doing it right and actually getting the infrastructure and this in place. And so, when I think about OPLink, I literally I kind of got bored of my day job and starting up an OP agency from the back end of, Beyond Recruitment at the time because I didn't have enough on. And so I was kind of just doing it. And the same with my food bag, I had went on parental leave to have Tom. He was, he didn't come on time, which I thought that he was going to be a timely Swedish baby, and he was more of a Kiwi, showed up late to the party and very energetic and wrote the business plan for my food bag. And, that was terrifying and exciting all at the same time. And, you just go away and you just slowly start. You just find the pieces to start. And the same with Tend. Tend always felt like it was going to be a massive mountain to climb, and we needed a really good team and a lot more capital than we've ever had to start a business with before. And so that was a whole different journey, and it's been really humbling because the issues that we're dealing with are deep-rooted societal issues, and, you come into it with the best intentions and the capabilities that you have at the time, but you realise that you quickly have to grow and evolve from there.
Because and tell me if I'm wrong, but with OPLink and with my food bag, I mean, it was kind of new to New Zealand. You could get in there. We probably didn't see the mistakes that they happened. Whereas Tend, as you say, you're dealing with the health system.
Yeah.
And with all of the difficulties within that, within legislation, within funding, within, you name it. So is that quite different?
Yeah, it has been. And I think, for Tend, what we're trying to do is, completely rebuild our healthcare system, the primary healthcare aspect of that. And it's a very audacious challenge. And, technology forms a significant part of that, but there's also a significant part that we cannot change, and that are areas that we just have to kind of incorporate into how we structure our business and how we think about outcomes. And so those are really different challenges, and there's no chance that any of us could have done what we're doing today with Tend without the lessons that we'd learned previously. Like, this is not a first kind of business that you try to tackle, because there are so many different things that we have to focus on at the same time, and it's incredibly complicated.
So on that, with my food bag, and you were in partnership with Teresa Getting, who you're good friends with, and then you had Nadia on board, and then you sold it. So why start Tend? I mean, I shouldn't say you obviously didn't need the money, but it's, like, it wasn't a financial decision to do it, was it?
In fact, it's probably been the opposite. It's been, James and I have been quite open about the fact that, when we initially came out of my food bag, we became financially free, and it enabled us to make a lot of, amazing decisions for us and for our broader family. And, we also looked at a lot of charitable opportunities, and certainly have got kind of a lot of charitable things that we do as well. But at the same time, we felt like, we weren't at that point of our career where we just wanted to do philanthropy. We wanted to apply our skill sets and our capital to something that we could do to make a real difference. And so, I'm really proud of the fact that we've brought a huge amount of capital into primary care. Primary care needs that. It's the largest amount of private capital I think that's ever gone into primary care in this country, to try to improve and make things better. And that is literally coming out of your bank account, month to month. And, so you're not getting paid. And then at the same time, you're working bloody hard to make a difference. And so really proud of that, but it's been incredibly challenging, and it's taken a lot longer than what I thought it would. And, it's a really humbling experience because you're constantly learning. And I think that when you come from the outside into health, often they don't accept you as a health system person or as someone that's kind of legitimate until you've served a certain amount of time. And I think now I'm starting to turn that corner where people go, oh no, well, she's been doing this for 5 or 6 years now. So, she does have a lot of context, but it takes quite a while to build up that mana in the sector. And that's hard, because you've got a lot of other skill sets and attributes that can help resolve some of the problems, but you just have to take a lot of time to truly understand, all of the interests as well of the sector. And
so if to someone out there that's thinking about starting up a business, what would sort of your top 2 or 3 bits of advice be to them?
Yeah, well, I think an idea is 1%, but execution is 99%. Like, so anyone can have an idea. And I remember this guy rocked up to me after a speaking engagement that I once did on the Gold Coast, and he was like, I had the idea for my food bag first. And I was like, yeah, what did you do with it?
Yeah, good on you.
And I was like, and so like an idea is 1%, execution is 99%. And so you've got to do something. The magic is in the action of actually doing it, and also being prepared to take the sacrifice and live with the risks day to day. And for some people, that's not palatable.
I was going to ask about that risk sort of side of it, because people sort of occasionally say to me, if you were talking to your teenage self, that old chestnut that you get, and I often think, I just wish I'd had a bit more courage to go and do something big and brave, because I certainly had.
I think you've done a lot of big and brave things, though, in fairness. So,
but I felt like I had the capability to go and do my own business and do something, and yet it was probably fear that held me back.
Yeah, look, and I think fear is, I once saw a headline on myself that was like, fearless leadership. And I think it's, I definitely feel the fear, and it's being able to manage that fear and be able to do things anyway. And I think that, great entrepreneurs are not like massive risk takers. They're actually really good risk managers.
Yeah.
Like, our job is to risk manage and risk mitigate, because, it's not just, in this instance, like our own capital and our team and our skill set, and, like all of it is on the line. And so you have to be really good at managing that risk, and you have to understand what the upside versus the downside is, and be prepared to have long periods of time of uncertainty and pressure, and that it never goes away. There's no single day of the week where you're fully on holiday, you're fully relaxed, because you're constantly. This is always on. Like, this is always part of who you are. And it would be like being in government, right? You can never walk away from it.
Never.
And so, whether that's in, whether you go to lunch or whatever, that's always there.
Yeah. So how much of it is setting their very clear goals and having that business plan to then equally being able to pivot?
Yeah, look, I think it's really important to have good strategic planning in place. And I think we've always done well on that. Clear goals, strategic plans, really directional for our team and for us. But I think at the same time, you have to be prepared to change as you go. things don't always go to plan and you might need to prioritize differently. And so you need to call out those challenges early and be prepared kind of to change the roadmap as you go. And so like things don't happen just linear, you make a lot of assumptions, and you just have to make sure that you're constantly testing those to make sure, what is actually not working, or, what are the things that we're doing really well, but we need to change, that's constant.
Who do you go to for advice?
I talk a lot to my husband. Like, he's probably the first person that I call when I have a problem or I've got a challenge, or it's not probably, he's the first person I call, period, about anything in relation to work. I obviously talk to Dame Teresa a lot, and I talk to Dr. Lee Mathias, and I brought aboard Marco Bogowski is fantastic. They always make themselves available to us. I've got really lucky with our co-founders through the years. It's probably one of the things that I'm most proud of. Inside Tend, Josh Robb, he is a phenomenal COO and co-founder, and Dr. Matarua London. We've got an exceptional executive team, so anyone in there, depending on what their issue is. And yeah, more broadly, like that's something that, Nadia and Carlos back in my food bag, very similarly, we're just constantly talking to each other about how you work for problems together. It's just not on one person's shoulders, right?
Do you think New Zealanders are too hard on successful people?
Yeah, look, I definitely think there's an element of that. And I think that, you get to be really thick-skinned, and you have to be. And if you put yourself out there, unfortunately, and it makes me worry for my children about the types of risks that they take, because, people don't shy away from saying things that they know are lies or, misinformation, and make assumptions. And often what's really interesting when you tackle some of those things is that, we're a really open organisation, and I've got an open door policy. Anyone that wants to come in and see what we're doing, I am most happy to take you through it. Like, we are so happy to show and tell. But often those people that are adversaries are actually not interested in that. They're not interested in actually seeing what's actually going on behind the scenes. And I find that really interesting, right?
Yeah, well, they're living a very small world, aren't they?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, it's always, come and have a look, talk to us about it. If you've got assumptions, and we can show you that that's not actually the way things works, and isn't that a great thing, So, yeah, but you've got to have a really thick skin, and I think, there can be some pretty rough, commentary in the space, and you just got to make sure that you've got thick skin.
And don't you find that rough commentary, like having experienced it a lot myself, but you sort of equally, they've lost the curiosity.
Totally.
Yeah, like it's like I've made up my mind. I've made up my mind on you. I've made up my mind on your business.
Yeah.
There's nothing you're going to say that's going to change that mind.
Totally.
And so I'm actually not an intelligent, curious person.
Yeah, I'm not interested in having a conversation about it because, this is how I feel about what you're doing. And as I said, for me, I'm the opposite. I always go, hey, come and look. Always happy to have a chat. You're most welcome, to come and see actually what we do, and happy to show and tell. And so that's my kind of consistent, position on that.
As I say at the beginning of this podcast, it's never too late to learn something new.
Absolutely.
Isn't it great that life still throws you lessons?
Totally.
And so I quite like if someone tries to change my mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they may have an angle that I hadn't thought of.
Well, it's actually really funny because our Before 16 team met with some politicians the other week, and one of the politicians came back to one of the people who had organised the event and said, it's not often that I change my mind on things, but I was speaking to your CEO, and I did. And I thought that was really humbling.
Yeah.
Like, what an amazing position to actually take, and to actually hear out what we were saying and contextualising it and saying, actually, this makes sense, And I'm always prepared to have my mind changed too. I love it with people that know more things than me and who are prepared to challenge, my thought process on things. So, yeah. It's an open invitation.
So you're young. So what do you have?
I'm going to take that again.
Do you have views on kind of what might be next? I scribbled down here, what's ahead of Cecilia, and then I've written politician question.
Absolutely, categorically never.
Why? You want to make a difference?
I do, but I do a really good job of doing that in private enterprise. Okay. And so I'm really happy with where I sit in my life. This is definitely not an area that I would ever tackle. And more broadly, like, it's not something that James or me or, like, our kids are probably our future. Like, I think that Tend is a long way, it's a long runway project for us. We've been doing this. I know people don't necessarily see it because my food bag was far more, kind of in the media, but like, I've been CEO for 6 years, and, I should be here another 6 years doing the same thing, hopefully. And so that's really what my runway looks like. I love what we're building. I genuinely feel such a high degree of conviction that we can build the best health system in the world.
Yeah, great.
And like that drives me. Like, what better thing to spend my time and energy on than trying to, create the best healthcare system in the world, make New Zealanders the healthiest people in the world, deliver the best healthcare experiences. And I genuinely think that we have got a pathway to get there. And that's my number one priority. That's my roadmap.
Well, if I was to give you any advice, I'd tell you you'd hate politics. It'd drive you nuts.
I'm not going there, so...
It would totally drive you nuts.
It would just...
Because you're such a doer and you're so into execution.
Look, I'm far too direct for anything like that. What you see is pretty much, it's just, well, you're pretty direct too. So, it's not a game that I would enter. And look, Wellington is a lovely place to go, but I'm a nervous flyer as it is. I can never go down there regularly.
Okay, well, we won't put that in the agenda then. Okay, finally for this segment, I'd love to know what was the best advice you were ever given and who was it from?
Well, it's again my husband James. He's amazing, but we talk a lot about kind of our life and our journey, and I think that people think about success, and success is often getting what you want. While happiness is wanting what you have. And, happiness for me is wanting what I have day to day. I get up, I look in the mirror and I feel incredibly grateful. I want what I have. And so I think it's really important that when you're pursuing, your life goals, are you looking for success? You're looking to get what you want? Or are you enjoying the days and wanting what you have day to day? And that's been something that I constantly check myself with and go, I am. I'm happy. And that is really meaningful to me.
Some of the best advice that I've heard was you saying be a leader, not a follower when it comes to
absolutely.
business. I love that.
Yeah, well, the thing is that followers, leaders think and talk about solutions. And followers think and talk about problems. And so it's a pretty easy game when you start separating out your team and your broader team. If people are thinking and talking about solutions, those are people that you should draw closer to yourself and that you should elevate inside your organisations. But if you constantly have people that are just throwing problems at you, those are not leadership qualities, and I've got a really empowered executive team, and every person inside that executive team will come with me and say, hey, look, this is a problem. This is how I'm thinking about solutions around that.
Yeah.
Right?
I was thinking
and
about your people
for the
this
whole
morning,
organisation. Right? So that's a real cultural attribute that you have to look for.
Yeah, I've met quite a few of them. I was thinking about them this morning. I was just thinking, man, you've got good people.
Yeah, it is. It's a good team.
Yeah, really, really exciting. Right, Cecilia, the podcast is called Ask Me Anything, and so far I've done all the asking, so this is your opportunity to ask me something if you would like to.
So look, I would love to hear more about your priorities at Pharmac. I think medicine is it's something that really interests me after a good friend of mine became incredibly unwell and passed away from a rare disorder. And so I would just like to know, what are the priorities for Pharmac going into the future, and how do you see delivering on that?
Yeah, well, I think, like you were just saying about business, what I've done the last 12 months is very clearly set out, not alone, actually incorporating patient advocates, incorporating the medical and clinicians and suppliers as well, and getting those reviews done in the background that then really set what does success look like. And I've got a 5-year plan at the moment. Fantastic. And then we've broken that down annually, and then I've broken it down to 90-day work programs. I've got enough people to do everything that we want to do, but literally if we're making continuous improvement, I call it, we can't change that organisation overnight because, as you know, the culture was very broken, and you can go into all the reasons for that. So at the moment, really concentrating on an organisational cultural change, completely transforming that, and then those very clear steps as to how we do it. But I've got to be honest with you, right now, I'm obsessed with getting more money so we can buy more medicines so that New Zealanders have better access.
I love that.
So how we do that, societal impacts, how we show, because we've never shown the savings that we can make.
Fantastic. By
giving people access earlier at times. That quality of life is obviously vitally important, but equally, a quality of death, without making that sound, as macabre as it is, but you actually should have the access that you want. And I don't think money's the answer to most things in government, to be quite honest with you. Yeah. But in Pharmac and our ability, we spend every penny.
Yeah.
And we don't waste it.
Yeah.
And so just $1 billion.
I love it.
Over 4 years.
Just casually. Well, I mean, I think what you're saying is correct here because it's about the cost-benefit analysis. And I think a large portion of it, people don't necessarily understand that through, providing people with the medication that they need at the life phase that they're in might prevent their partner from taking sick leave for X days, might enable them to go back to school, might enable their children to better participate in the education system because they're not distracted by the fact that mum's on whatever it is, right? And so there are really broad societal impacts, and I'm really excited by that because it sounds like you're focusing on the right things.
Well, and some of it's
happy as a
keep it simple, right? Because it is so complicated and you can go down all of that. But I think I'm the first person that's ever asked the question, how many people are on the sickness benefit in New Zealand? How long will they be on because they can't get access to a medicine?
Oh my gosh, yeah, no, that's just like...
Like you're right on all of that other stuff, but that can be a bit harder to define and we'll get better and better at it with the data we collect. But how about the stuff we do know?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's a really good baseline to start thinking about how we treat our population in a way that actually lifts their mana, lifts their engagement, and lifts their engagement with the workforce and things. So that's super exciting.
Well, thanks for asking because it took us down that path.
I love it.
And you keep doing your bit and I'll keep doing mine.
Fantastic.
And then if we can have healthier New Zealanders that are living bigger and better lives, that's my goal.
There is no reason why New Zealanders can't be the healthiest people in the world. We live on a small island. We're only 5 million people. We can make a real difference on things like lifespan. And so I'm really interested in this. That's my goal,
Love it.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for sharing everything with us and for doing it so openly and honestly. And I think that girl got a bit of your feist.
Definitely. She's got a bit of me in her.
Yeah, I like that. Okay. Oh, well, and that's it for another episode of Ask Me Anything. If you have enjoyed this episode, please follow Ask Me Anything on iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you check out some of our past fabulous guests while you're there. I'll be back next week. I'm Paula Bennett. Ask Me Anything. Goodbye.